Welcome to the podcast from HeadHunters Northwest. HeadHunters Northwest. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach, where we take you behind the scenes into our customers' businesses. For over 20 years, HeadHunters Northwest has served the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors worldwide. Listen in as we discuss the inner workings of our USA and international customers. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of HeadHunters Northwest Podcast. I am thrilled to have Jim Drager as my guest. He is the CEO of the Drager Group. And I'm going to ask you, Jim, to, if you don't mind, walk our audience through your history, how you got to be in this industry and the places that you work. Because I know today we want to focus on strategic planning, and we're going to talk about a lot of things with all the new businesses that have come into the, I would even say, global defense, small arms, and the shooting sectors, really. A lot of new businesses. There's a lot of these founders and owners that don't have the skill sets that you and I've talked about that you've helped with a lot. So let's talk about, have the audience hear what you've done and where you've worked. I'm sure I could walk through your resume, but why do that when I have the expert?
Well, thank you, Shaylene, and truly an honor to be here with you. You are probably the second most visible person to the industry, with only being succeeded by your dog, George, who knows everybody. And I've had the pleasure to meet George. And anyway, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's really an honor to be part of an industry that I've always been passionate about. And I'll just tell you a quick story before we get into it. But I went to Catholic high school, and I always, in my books, I carried around the Remington catalog, which back then had everything they made, every firearm, every bit of clothing, and every load with its ballistics table. And unfortunately, I spent way more time memorizing the 100-yard trajectory of a .22 Hornet bullet than I probably did on theology back then. But anyway, I've been passionate about it a long time, and truly it's been an honor and a privilege to be in the industry, to help the industry, and continue to serve the industry. Got my start, like a lot of people, got a degree in college business administration. Luckily, I was smart enough to listen to a good professor I had who said, "You don't know anything. Now you have a degree. Now you have the ability to go learn." And
that's great advice.
It was. She was right on target. So I sought some experiences in fields outside of my degree, because I did want to be in leadership or management or something like that. And so I joined an engineering company and became a project manager, eventually got involved in sales and marketing, quality assurance, operations. And because you really, if you want to understand how businesses work, you have to have had time in the seat. There's just no substitute to it. You can study it to a certain degree, but being in it, there is just no substitute. So while I can't say I've done everything, I have actually had experience in the accounting world as well. But I've had a lot of experience in those core processes that all businesses have, regardless of what industry you're in. From then, back in the early 2000s, I got involved with consulting and learned about the consulting as a profession, not as something to do, but the practice and profession of being a consultant. And it's not hanging a shingle outside. As you know, in your own business, you're very consultative.
It does take being in the seat. I do agree. Like, even in my business, I learn from you guys all the time. Every manufacturing facility I go to, any SaaS companies and software, everything has a life cycle. And even in my own business, it's just a smaller scale. But having done all of my own accounting, it's the same thing, as it's just applying it to bigger numbers and more complex things. But I would not presume to know how to counsel businesses on the strategic planning, because, I think you and I met, when you were at Colt.
Yeah, it was.
And you've had a lot of leadership roles in the industry, in manufacturers, and then also done a lot of consulting.
Yeah, my career has really been a true blessing. When I started my own practice back in the early 2000s, can't believe it's been that long. My focus really was on strategic planning because I had learned the process of facilitation to take an organization through and develop a strategic plan. But I also had the background in running manufacturing facilities by that point in my career. And again, had spent time in a lot of these core processes. And through the strategic planning, found out that a lot of the companies I was working with really not only needed help in the planning, but they couldn't implement the plan.
Yeah.
Now you gave them the compass, but they couldn't get there. They needed people to help them in core roles. So I decided to really focus my practice on less companies, less customers, but that I would be perhaps more involved with and be more intimate with. And that could be as few as one at a time or a couple at a time, but to really impact it versus just doing a lot of strategic plans and wishing people luck. I got involved and actually took some direct roles. Maybe somebody needed a vice president of operations until they could find their own or maybe grow their own or whatever that was. And that really then led into organizational transitions, transformations, turnarounds, startups, and all of that still that core focus of, what's the plan? Where are we going? And so that's been the constant theme throughout my career. And my dream job, in high school was to work for Remington Ammunition. And lo and behold, I was actually offered a position in Remington Ammunition. And
isn't that something?
And I turned it down of all things. Unfortunately, Remington was not in the state of where it needed to be for me at that point anyway. But so I've been fortunate to work with companies like Colt, Pepperball, Beretta, Century Arms. I did a lot of work with, but not directly for Remington, and a number of other firearms companies. And just as passionate about today as I was in that little kid who was staring out the window and dreaming of ballistics and things like that.
Well, it's a fun industry and they're fun products. And, we were talking a little bit off camera last week, you and I, when we were talking about doing this podcast. There are so many new companies, and I would say young, meaning young companies or also young people that are starting companies that maybe don't have all that business experience, but they have this great idea and it's a great business and they've hired a couple people and they're running a business, but it can easily get spun out of control. And even if you have the world's greatest product, that doesn't mean that it automatically rolls up into a great business.
Absolutely.
And, I wanted to do this because I want people to know there's help out there. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and hire an executive full time. You can get a fractional executive like yourself.
In a lot of those.
Yeah. And you're not just going to come in and say, I only know how to do this one thing. It's a well-rounded, hey, let's take a look at the whole operation. And, you might consider doing this or you might consider doing that. And you can help get them on track so that they're not wasting their money and they're not burning out. Right? Because I'm sure burnout is huge in these environments.
Especially, and again, I've had the privilege of working in the industry and outside of the industry. And I still do a little bit outside of the industry.
Yeah.
And the key to this industry is almost always an emotionally driven industry. People like me are passionate about it, like you. We're passionate about it. And that's what makes it special. But that's also can be our Achilles heel is people think they have a better mousetrap, and maybe they do have a better mousetrap, but does anybody want more mice caught or mice caught in a different way? And I learned a great example, a company I worked with a lot in the late 90s and into the 2000s. They actually invented a mechanical heart.
Wow.
The Lion heart. It was done a collaboration with Penn State Health, and it was a left ventricle assist device, and it worked. It survived clinical trials, and it saved lives, and it was going to be the next thing. But the problem was the medical community didn't want it. They wanted heart transplant.
No kidding.
And to this day, they still want heart transplants. And, look at the success with heart transplants. And now they're even experimenting with 3D printed materials and genetically modified animal hearts and all that. But, in the 90s, they actually created this. And what I really learned through that is being an engineering, entrepreneurially driven company can be great, but it can also lead to failure because it's not necessarily tied to what does the market want. And you and I talked about this. I love going at SHOT Show or any of the big trade shows. I love going to either the lower level or the back areas and see what new products, what these passionate entrepreneurs are coming up with, often in their garage, often with, putting their houses on the line. And they do come up with a lot of innovation, but you look at it and then you go 3 booths down and somebody else has exactly the same thing. Or, you look at them and you go, I think just because you think you can build it doesn't mean it's a great idea to monopolize and all that. So, to your point, there's a lot of it that goes on in this industry. But I think it starts with that passion, which is our strength, but it can be overkill.
And I think too that I don't want people that are listening to this to think that you're a talented person only for small startup companies, because that's why I was intrigued about doing this. You actually have worked for some of the largest companies, and you can come in and help them with process improvements. And it's that fresh set of eyes. And I know a lot of executives realize that and they hire consultants, but I think it is hard to find a well-rounded consultant that knows the industry. And also there's a lot of value to having worked in other industries that you bring to the table. You don't want to only have just one industry. The value is having a broader view, I think.
There really is. And one of the mega trends that I see is the firearms industry is a laggard industry in that it doesn't, the new processes in manufacturing or technology don't start here in this industry. They start someplace else.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's coming out of the automotive industry. And one of the big drivers in the 80s, 90s was the fact that Japan just took over the automotive industry, and the United States really had to catch up and learn those practices. And that has permeated throughout manufacturing and has made us better manufacturers. But it's appalling to me when you walk into, companies that have in the firearms industry, and I'm not going to mention names, but their inventory turns are measured in years, not days or weeks or months.
Yeah.
Years. And you wonder why they struggle financially, maybe to the point of bankruptcy. And, but we've learned that, through lean manufacturing and some good practice like sales and operations, integrated sales and operations planning with good market intel coming in as real time as you can get it.
Yeah.
We've learned that in other industries, and it's coming into the firearms industry. So we're a laggard industry in many areas. So it really does benefit, at least for me, and I think the industry, to have those other experiences. And I, in a former life, I worked with a lot of large companies in the automotive space, GM, Volvo, companies like that, and Cummins, Mack, Caterpillar, and learned a tremendous amount from them that certainly is applicable to the firearm space.
Well, we didn't talk about this, so maybe this is a loaded question, but I if you feel comfortable, I'm curious as to, there's a common complaint in the industry about, those automotive people, they don't understand our world. Look at what they wrecked and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that's specific to one person or a group of people, but it is a common thing that you hear inside our industry. So since we brought it up, and I do agree with you that the manufacturing has benefited from the automotive systems, what are the Are there other things that the automotive industry doesn't quite align with? I mean, how does that come into play when you're talking about the industry filled with passion? Because I'm sure there's tons of automotive engineers that are passionate. How do those things jive?
Well, I think the core processes are the same. They are,
Yeah.
It's just like a heartbeat on a person. The heart's a heart. But what I think is different is the speed of innovation in automotive is light years faster than in firearms. And I think that's something that, we haven't really evolved the smokeless cartridge in 120 years since its invention. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Have we, evolved, how we launch that projectile? Yes, but not much, really. There's been innovation on the optics side, but if you look in the automotive world, they not only know what model they're launching this year, and Toyota can design from scratch to first unit off the line in a year, a car.
Yeah.
The firearms industry, it's like 3 years, and it's a way less complex item.
Yeah, way less. Why does it take us that long, do you think? What are the hangups that happen in that design process? Is that engineers that are designing products that we don't really need and we don't stop them soon enough? Or, not on you engineers at all? But
I think it really goes to the very top of the companies.
Yeah.
A company has to realize that speed matters. It's just speed to market and being in tune with the marketplace matters. Doesn't matter if it's firearms, doesn't matter if it's cars. So the firearms world looks at it like, yeah, the car guys are changing their models every year. Well, yeah, they have to because the competition does. The archery industry gets it really well. Like they obsolete their bows pretty much every year, and they create a passion every year for the new bow. They're really good at it.
I don't think I knew that. I didn't tie that together. That's interesting.
It is interesting. And it goes to that this is such an emotionally driven industry. Like you're an archer and you need the newest bow because it's 335 feet per second and your old bow is only 320. It really doesn't matter that much to the deer. It really doesn't. But to the hunter, it's like you're constantly looking to upgrade, and these bows are expensive and they're high tech. And the archery industry gets it. The automotive industry gets it. The Remington 870 is still in production after 60 years.
Right.
The 1100, and that's just Remington. And a lot of these core arms are still pretty much the same. Now, of course, we do have some innovation. A lot of the Italians have brought some really great products, South American companies, Turkish companies, and some of them are making fantastic products.
Yeah.
So, back to your original question, I actually would argue stronger that the more we think firearms is a unique animal, the more we think that to our own demise.
Interesting. That's great feedback. I think it'd be hard to argue that.
There's a lot of Turkish companies jumping into the space. Everybody sees it. Right. And they're making now there's some less than high quality products, but a lot of them are really high quality products produced in world-class facilities that are making arms for NATO. These are world-class facilities. And those facilities are following the same practices as any other world-class manufacturing facility with their quality standards, with their technology that they use to ensure quality, their innovation, and they're jumping into the space. And look at the result. You don't have to look.
Yeah, they're selling a lot of firearms.
They are. And if you look at the percentage of the firearms that are now sold in the U.S. by companies that don't have their roots in the U.S., it's the vast majority now.
Yes, that's right. I looked at those the other day. It was surprising.
Yeah.
So what do you think that our firearms businesses, and when we're talking about strategic planning, what are some ways that strategic planning really makes a big difference or an impact to their bottom line? Because if they're, if you're in charge of a P&L or a division or you're an owner, all of it sounds great. But the first thing you think of is, oh my God, if I had the money for that, I'd do this. Or, How do we make that strategic planning pay for itself? Because I know it does. But I'm not an expert and wouldn't know how to label that.
Well, strategic planning does two things. It stops you from doing things that are not aligned with where you should go. And that saves you. That can save your company right there. And it also makes sure that your investments are absolutely aligned with where you're going. And so it does both of that. It eliminates the wrong investments and it makes you invest properly where you need to go. So as an example, there's different ways to differentiate your company. You've differentiated yourself because you give high touch, unrivaled service. I know it. I've known you long enough. I can see
my
it.
Goal. That's my goal.
That's why you're doing your podcast. So if you decide that that's how you're going to differentiate yourself and that's your strategic plan, you're not all of a sudden going to offer low prices or the lowest price, or that you're going to offer some other, kind of service that's not in line with, your way of differentiating yourself. And the same thing happens in a business. If they're going to differentiate themselves on service, well, then they have to be aligned and have great service. If they're going to differentiate themselves based upon new innovative products, well, then you're going to have to invest in engineering. But then what are those products? And because that can get out of hand very quickly. And again, that's what strategic planning does, is makes sure that you're making the right investments and not making the wrong investments. So in and of itself, I usually find that companies and leadership are faced and looking in the mirror like, oh my God, we're going to have to stop doing what we've been doing because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And they kind of already know it, mostly. But it forces them to put that on paper and make a commitment to making those hard choices.
I think an outside consultant, I have hired people to say, okay, come in and take a look at this circus that I'm running and tell me what you see, because when you're in it every day, it's really hard to see. And after a while, it just gets to be, I think it's just the good business management to bring in a consultant once in a while, if nothing else, to just say, what am I missing? What do I not see? Because you're right in the thick of it every day. Even if you're the best CEO in the world and the best board member, that's all great. But to bring an outside consultant in, they see things differently than we see them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And a strategic plan is not just a plan. It's not just a document. It's a process.
Yeah.
And as part of that process is, again, what's your mission? Why do you exist? That's what the mission really does for you. What's your vision? What do you want to look like as you're trying to achieve your mission? What's your strategies? How are you going to get from where you're at to what you want to be, which is your vision? And the strategies define that. And once you have that definition, of course, all the supporting actions and the action plans and the budgets that go along with that, now you've got something that you can turn into a process, a core process that every month or whatever period of frequency you need, that you can look back and say, how are we doing on that? Are we just mired in the let's get all the product out the door to make the monthly shipments goals? But are we actually looking at the compass? Are we looking at, what our strategic plan is supposed to be? And even more specifically in this industry, one of the things that I really focus on is, do these companies have any kind of a sales and operations process, an S&OP process? You're looking out in terms of innovation and saying, next year at SHOT Show is a great thing for our industry.
Yeah.
For not only the commercial firearms for the hunter side of it, that side of it, but also for the law enforcement, for the military side.
Yeah.
Because it forces you have a window of opportunity that happens every year. It's not sneaking up on you.
Yeah, right.
So you should already have a roadmap of what are you going to release in 2 to 3 years? If that's your product development cycle, what's that going to look like? And if you don't have that, you are already set up for failure for SHOT Show 28, because you're not going to be ready on time. And
That's a big commitment, not only manpower and finances, but it's a missed opportunity. It's like going to SHOT Show and not, in my opinion, not sending any press releases out and not making those connections ahead of time. And you really do have to plan way in advance. And I don't know, I don't like surprises, which is really crazy if you think about being an entrepreneur or business owner. But that is one thing that I have really tried to work on and improve is I don't like surprises because it bungs up my whole finance plan or anything that I've got going on because I'm such a small company. So to plan out those things makes good sense to me. Doesn't mean you can always do it, but it seems like if I were a company right now that was getting, really getting going in the industry, man, I would feel like I should light a fire underneath myself because you have 3 years, before you have another president come in. And if you don't know that we're cyclical based on politics, then you are going to learn a really hard lesson at some point.
Yeah. And that gets back to that sales and operations planning process. And I'll give you a good example of that. And then I do want to talk about our current environment because it's got lots of positive and negative forces going on. And
that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Companies really need to do it. But one of the success stories that I was able to participate in with a major firearms manufacturer, I won't mention the name, but we almost doubled sales in 1 year. And the way we did it was after I had joined up right around the time of SHOT Show came in, and it was a disaster. It was like being at the Bronx Zoo. Like literally the engineers were gluing together products to get them onto the wall to display. And I would say, so when's that going to be ready to sell? They're like, oh, it's not ready to sell. So what's the point?
Yeah.
In 1 year's time, we literally met 2 weeks after SHOT Show, and we made a decision. These are the products that will be not only that we're displaying at SHOT Show, but will be ready for sale and have inventory available at SHOT Show. To the point where we brought in our customer service team, and they were in the back of the booth, live into the ERP system. And when a customer said, "That's really cool, I like that, I'd like to order some," I said, "Let me introduce you to so-and-so." And we took them around and they put their orders in at SHOT Show.
Wow. Now I love hearing that.
And that's what I mean about having a plan, having an integrated sales and operations process. And again, this environment that we're in now is I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
But you better be careful because we have lots of counter forces going on, and you better know which one and how they're going to, what they are and how they're going to affect your business.
This isn't going to be like Trump's last presidential run. This is different. I mean,
this is different.
This is different. And I think that I really want to get into this because I think this is super important for our listeners. And thank you, Jim. I mean, I'm not even paying you for your expertise, and I feel bad now because I should have paid you because this is the real valuable stuff here. And when we talked, I told you there was a company that in October had called me about a role. And they said, we need to find this person in marketing. I said, okay, great. But tell me more about what that looks like and what's your plan for the upcoming election in November. If Trump wins, what's your plan? If Kamala Harris wins, what's your plan? And they didn't have one. And I said, now, then I don't think if I were you, I would hire anyone until you have a plan. Because there's a big difference in our world, generally speaking, the political environment. So I would love for you to kind of give your thoughts on what do you look for and how do you plan for the unplannable? Because that's pretty much what we live through.
Yeah, especially in our industry at large. So I'm going to back up a little bit and just use this as a point of reference to when Trump got elected, 8 years ago. We went through something called the Trump slump.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been in the industry remembers it. It was minus 24%. And leading up to the election, it was go-go. In fact, I was interviewed on, I forget who it was, not Gun Talk, but one of the SHOT Show shop floor, people walking around, and they asked me what was my opinion of, Barack Obama versus Trump. And I said, I think Barack Obama loves guns. And they said, you're kidding. I said, well, I'll summarize it. Every time he opens his mouth, gun sales went up.
Yeah.
So he's a smart guy, and he kept talking, and gun sales kept going up. I can only draw the conclusion that he liked guns and gun sales.
Yeah.
But the point of it is, it's an emotionally driven market. It's not logically driven, not by and large. And I'm sure that, there's, instances where it's both, but by and large, it's emotionally driven. How many guns do we really need? I have lots of guns. I don't need more guns.
All of mine got lost on a boat that sank. I don't know.
But for me, I have lots of them.
Yeah.
I don't need more, but I want more.
Right.
And
well, it's an emotional purchase. I mean, you see the newest thing, and I go out, we go to NRA, and Dwayne, my husband, looks at us. He goes, oh, you got to see this rifle. Well, we walked out, we bought two. You can't just have one in my house. You have to have two. But you're right. I mean, you don't need them, but you want them. So that, to me, that's the difference in the automotive industry in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're a car collector or you have a specific niche you're focused on, you buy a car because you need it.
Yep. And, there's certainly a lot of, hey, I want it, I don't really, but firearms is way more that way. And so we had the Trump slump, and what it really taught us was that the market will calm down and go, phew, they're not going to take our guns. So we are definitely going to go through that. But I like to look at things, I call it like a force field analysis. So you've got, negative forces pushing down on a market, and you have positive forces pushing up on the market. So what are the negative forces that are going to cause our market to retract? And again, in a certain instance where you've got a niche product that people need or something like that may not respond to these forces, or maybe respond more. But so it's very, people feel safer. They just do. They did not feel safe. We had riots, we had, cities burning. We had defund the police. We had all things
during Biden's reign. Yeah.
Here I'm in the Eastern Shore of Virginia. We had a lot of people exiting Baltimore, Washington, coming over here because it's safe. So it was real in terms of its effects. So people are going to feel safe under Trump. I think so. I think most people agree with that. We're probably going to see a slackening of that. Trump's promised to end wars. Now, will he? I'd like to think so. But the war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East are consuming resources that are exactly the same resources that we use for domestic firearms. Metals, copper, lead, powder. As a tangible example of that, those wars, they just announced Alliant Powder is going to have a 10% increase on its powder. Why is that? There's not a lot of powder manufacturers. You can't build powder manufacturing plants quickly. They take decades to build because of environmental and safety and all that. And they're not just going to make the investment. So just because a war spikes up doesn't mean they can ramp up production.
Right.
So prices go up. So if the wars end, and that's going to have a softening of those materials. So as an example, and I happened to buy this yesterday, we're already seeing ammo availability. Here's just a standard general. I bought it at Walmart, got a pretty good price on it. It's a good load. I assure you, during ammo shortages, I couldn't get them.
Right. No, we definitely, it is amazing how our industry, it just moves and flexes just with the blink of an eye, which is important about this strategic planning, because when you're doing that, do you plan for situation 1, 2, and 3, and then have backup plans? Because you can't plan for everything.
Well, the factors that cause it to go up and down, while, who knows when a terrorist is going to cause an event, and next thing you know, we're embroiled in another. You can't predict that. But, the effect of Trump on wars, we can take a pretty good stab at that. And what does that mean? We know what that looks like. We know that, gun sales have been declining the last couple of years. We know that. I would say with Trump in office, it's probably going to continue. So So you can identify a lot of them, certainly not all of them. And that's what strategic planning forces you to do. And then put that into your sales and operations planning, which should become almost a weekly practice, relative to back to, hey, this year we're going to introduce these models. We think we're going to sell 12,000 of them, 1,000 a month. Are we on track to sell 1,000, make and sell 1,000 a month?
Yeah.
I'm oversimplifying it to make the point.
Right.
But that's where large companies fail. And I'll give you one real tangible example of this. I learned this again in the Trump slump a couple of years ago. Major, like if you're Walmart and you want to sell those shotgun shells and you can't get them during a tight economy where you just can't get ammo, you place exactly that same order with Federal, with Winchester, with Remington, with Fiocchi, with whoever, because you need to sell them. And when the lead times are long and the manufacturers aren't you place that same order. So that demand is fake. You may say, oh my gosh, we have an order. You don't necessarily have an order. It's whoever fills that order first. And
that's a good point.
And the unwise companies, and this happens a lot, end up saying, oh my gosh, I got this big order from Cabela's. And not that I'm not doing Cabela's,
right.
But they don't realize if it's a cancelable order, is it really an order?
Right.
And again, that's where strategic planning, looking at the various forces that may affect your business, are making a plan and being conservative.
Yeah.
Well, at least on the conservative side, and really watching your inventories and your commitments for incoming materials is where your fiscal health is going to, reside ultimately.
And being conservative on your planning and your forecasting does not mean that you're not optimistic.
No,
I think that people, I don't want people to go away from this thinking, oh, this is a downer. It's not a downer. It's a positive thing. The sooner you get on strategic planning and really take a look at stuff, the better you're going to be, because you may have your most profitable years are likely going to be the years that aren't insane.
Yeah. And we all know just because it's down now, it's not going to stay down long. There are forces pushing us up. Yeah. Our floor constantly gets raised. We have more female shooters than ever. Yeah. Fantastic. Continuing to grow. It's proliferating in the products. It's proliferating in the opportunities. It is common for women to be hunting now. It wasn't common a generation ago.
That's right.
We have more youth shooters, as an example, and more youth shooting opportunities. If you look at even just hunting opportunities, to take the state of Pennsylvania, one of the largest hunting sales states, one of the largest hunting bases, gun bases, whatever, the number of seasons that are available to the hunter now starts in late September and goes through January. It used to be bow and arrow and rifle. Now it's muzzle loader, there's a crossbow, you can still do traditional archery, there's inline muzzle loader, there's flintlock seasons. So all of a sudden, I like to hunt deer, like I need 5 new weapons when in the past I only had 1.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of the shooting sports themselves, the long distance shooting is real. There's a lot of competitions and a lot of technology, is particularly in the optics side, but also on the platform side that's being invested. So to your point, this is actually a great time, but it's a great time to knuckle down, get your plans, make sure you're fiscally sound, and get ready, because the next wave is going to come, and you want to be able to ride it and not just sit back and do nothing, because that's where you will get caught.
Yeah. If you sit back and do nothing, your competition is already beating you, because they're already innovating in your sleep. That's been my business mantra, is you don't sleep, because you have to keep ahead of your competition. It doesn't matter what the business is. I do want to touch on one more thing that we didn't talk about ahead of time. When you're looking at the industry as a whole, do you think it's wise, or are there opportunities to diversify? And how do you feel about companies being only in the commercial space? We call commercial the people like me who go to Cabela's or wherever and buy their things, the dealers. But are there companies that can or should be into military, law enforcement, government sales? Would that help them level out their playing field? And what's the pluses and minuses of that? Because those are all different buying seasons and different products.
Yeah, there's a lot of allure to getting involved in the military and law enforcement. There is. And it is a great market. And once you're in it, you're in it. It's hard to change away from your product. As an example, if your product's on an officer's duty belt, well, that officer does not make the decision to, I don't want to use that flashlight, I'm going to go buy my own. No. Those are big decisions that are made at a higher level, and once you're in, you're in. The barrier to entry is massive and daunting. And if you think it's long, it's 4 times longer. And everybody wants to get in there. And my counsel has always been is make sure that you are fiscally sound and that you are able to make a long-term, and when I say long-term, 5 to 10 year investment to break that market. You may have a better mousetrap. You may really have a better mousetrap.
Yeah.
But a short sales cycle is, the law enforcement's a little faster than military, unless you happen to get in with some branch of special forces that can do their own thing. And they are out there, but everybody's after them.
Right.
But it's 3 years. But typically it's going to be a 5 to 10 year investment if you're successful.
And you're competing with other brands. I mean, these are all, there's a process to go through to get approved on the military list. But it does have, and that was my question. If you front loaded all that, if you could do that, if you said, this is one of my long-term strategic goals, and you set up for that, then wouldn't that help your company, navigate this up and down more?
Absolutely. It is worthwhile. But again, you have to have the financial health to make those investments with zero return for 5 to 10 years. And not get swayed off of it and say, no, we are going to break into that market. And again, if you're successful, it's 5 years on the short. And it may be never, but if you really have a better mousetrap and you're doing the right things, it can be a great market. And then once you're in, my God, look at Colt. Like, they're still in there with the M16 after all those, since 47. So it can be a great long run and a good part of a long-term strategy. So that's an excellent point. Yeah.
Okay. That's good information. Well, thank you for this, Jim. I know you and I, we could be talking for like another hour, but my poor listeners, I usually do a shorter one. I knew this was going to be longer, and it's a struggle to even end it because there's so many things that I want people to know that you have experience in. I guess I'll just encourage our listeners to, if you're not sure, if you could use a consultant or if you've got a project, reach out to Jim, his contact information. There'll be a link on the Spotify and YouTube and iHeartRadio and Apple Podcasts, wherever you find this, and on our website. But I would really encourage you to think about reaching out to Jim and seeing, hey, what do you think? Is this a project you're interested in? Because it just pays for itself, honestly, because not doing something stupid could save your company, and getting someone with a set of eyes on it and go, well, you could do this, or here's an idea here. It just makes all the difference.
Well, Shaylene, thank you. It's been an honor, and always enjoy your presence. Never get enough time with you. And thank you so much for the honor of being on your podcast. And you're the best for the industry. You really, you really have us at your heart. You do such a great job. So thank you for all you do.
You are my people. I don't know what I'd do without you guys. You guys fill my soul more than I can even say. So thank you, Jim. And thank you for listening to HeadHunters Northwest Podcast. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HeadHunters Northwest Podcast. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach. You can reach out at HeadHuntersNW.com or call 605-600-1709. Join us again next week as we look behind the curtain into the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.